Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you very much for Dr. Syed Muhammad Mutahar from Australia, as well as Dr. Yusnor Rizam Ma'arif from Malaysians. Okay, both of them, for your informations, were my PhD student, struggling enough to complete their PhD. Yet they are working as a practitioner or in the industry rather than to be academics like myself. Later, for your information, our topic today behind me, practicing agile project management. What is agile? You can read in my LinkedIn in ERP. Later, probably they are going to share with us what is a ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. Processes and development, project management, managing the ERP process of the development part. It is to say that basically one person, Syed Muhammad Mutahar, is expert in Odoo. What is Odoo? Later he will talk about it. And Dr. Yusnor Rizam is expert in SAP, not Shah Alam Properties. It's a software in ERP. So without any further ado, we're going to have 1 hour or less this time around. Like the previous one, we have a lot of questions from the floor, and I hope this time as well from the students. And I saw here also one of my UKM students, Joshua Faburada. Thanks a lot for coming. I just invite you this afternoon. Okay, well, gentlemen, maybe without any further ado, it's like a round robin. I will ask our Yusnor Rizam first, and then Dr. Syed Mutahar. Okay, Yus, can you brief about yourself and what are you doing currently practicing this ERP in this SAP, and share with us what is a SAP ERP, and do you use Agile in your work, your daily work? Okay, over to you.
All right. Yeah, thanks again for the invitation tonight. And thanks for the participant also. And yeah, a little bit about my background. I've been working for more than 15 years. My total working experience, and I've been working as a consultant for about 12 years, if I'm not mistaken. But in the ERP, specifically SAP, because actually I am the certified SAP finance consultant. Yeah. So SAP, what is SAP is a Germany based ERP system that was founded in 1974, if I'm not mistaken, by 5 former IBM employees. So these 5 former IBM employee, the guy who actually created the very first version of the ERP SAP system. Yeah. So I talk specifically. I'm referring to SAP system. That was my expertise, right? So I also have an experience in our local financial integrated ERP system in Malaysia, but I worked with this company for only 2 years, and after that I moved to many consulting agency in Malaysia to implement the ERP system. Okay, now here in this session we talk about agile practices, whether it is relevant in ERP process. Is that your question, Dr. Nurhizam?
Yes, my first question.
Oh, yeah, okay, your first question.
Is it relevant or not? Yeah.
Okay. I'm not an expert in Agile because I'm not practicing a project management role during the ERP implementation. I'm a pure SAP ERP consultant. So more precisely, as a SAP system consultant with a little experience, but majoring in finance module, right? But still have experience in other module like project management or project system, sales, procurement. Right. My main skill set is finance, or in SAP we call it as a FICO. Or now they have a very new technology so-called S4HANA, yeah, in the market. So I've been involved with.
Maybe you can elaborate. Yeah, please elaborate on that.
S4HANA is the new technology launched by SAP in back 2015. Okay, so most of the client, especially in the European side or US, they already adopt this new technology of S4HANA, but current in Malaysia is very few company. But still, some of the big multinational company is currently they start looking on the implementation or migration, whatever we call it. Okay, it's a new, even though it's a new implementation, they try to adopt with a new technology of SAP lah. So that's we call it as S4HANA. S4HANA, yeah. This in-memory computing.
S4HANA.
Yeah. So I've been involved in the implementation of ERP, ERP system using the Agile approach in my previous experience. Okay, so I'm not really experienced so much on the Agile, but I'm not going to explain in detail what is ERP all about. I assume everyone is aware of it, right? ERP means the enterprise resource planning system. To be exact, like I mentioned earlier, SAP, one of the vendor. We have Oracle in the globe, Microsoft Dynamics, Sage, Epicor, and so on and so forth. So ERP system is actually off-the-shelf software. We call it as off-the-shelf software, and therefore they have a different life cycle if compared to other software development project. I mean, other than ERP. So we just imagine other standalone system like whatever system is a attendance system, record management system, or any other standalone system. So ERP system usually developed via the waterfall approach. Okay, I'm talking about waterfall first. Why? Because of long process of the implementation. Okay, very sequential and very linear method that has so far to ensure the reliability of the ERP system. So we know that the ERP system is very complex system, is a very integrated system among other modules, right? So the agile culture was made for the software, okay, that needs to be built from the ground up. It can potentially how to say catalyze the implementation and customization process in ERP system better than waterfall method. That is my opinion. Okay, most people, especially project manager, project manager, especially this person who have a certification in the Agile Scrum methodology. So they say that the Agile approach is better than the waterfall. Okay, for me, both approaches have their pro and cons. Okay, I remember where there were a project I was involved in before that also combine both approach. Okay, for example, for instance, in the early stage of the ERP system implementation, a lot of time is allocated to get input on the on the ERP requirement. So we use waterfall. We use waterfall in the first phase of the project. However, in the later stage, such as for example design or testing phase, we continue the project with Agile approach. So there is a mixed method of the project implementation methodology. So this is why more and more businesses are investing in adopting an Agile approach that enable customized sprint, process sprint. So in Agile, we have a sprint process, right? So whereas a waterfall approach would entail waiting a full year to deploy it and to test the software. But Agile allows developer or consultant to prioritize certain functionalities and roll them out in maybe in 6 or less than 6 months of sprint. So my answer to the question is yes, it's relevant to ERP processes.
Oh, thank you very much. It's like a hybrid between Agile and Waterfall.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, now we go into our speaker from Australia, Dr. Muhammad Mutahar. Over to you. Maybe a brief introductory about yourself, your experience in industry in ERP, maybe a mix of Odoo. What is Odoo? Just now, Dr. Yusno Rizam already mentioned about what is SAP, and then please elaborate more. Over to you, sir. The practicing of Agile in ERP. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rizam, for the invitation, and just saying hello to other members of this call and also participants here. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I have PhD in ERP systems. So basically, my first career in ERP was back in 2005 when I joined a company to work as a software engineer, and they were building an ERP system. At that time, I was like thinking like, what is ERP? And it was like the first job I had. And since then, I've been working for different companies in Malaysia as well, and also in the Netherlands for a Dutch company, and here in Australia as a software engineer, and then later on as a tech leader of these companies. So the tool that I use in my development and in our project was primarily Odoo, but and which I will go through this shortly. But then at the same time, I also had to study more about SAP systems, because most of our projects were related to basically customers migrating from their ERP system, SAP, into something that is more affordable. So ERP was there since I think 1980 something. And SAP at that time was the main player in the market. So SAP R3 was one of the first products they basically released. I mean, one of the key products they released. And top companies in the US and manufacturing companies in Europe, they adopted this software, but it was like back in 1985 and 86 where we started seeing implementation of this ERP systems. So later on, we had more and more players in the market. And I think these days, if we Google ERP system and ERP systems and providers, we can easily find more than hundreds of ERP vendors in the market. Of course, we have just a few key players, but then when it comes to specialization, there are other players in the market too. So therefore, not only about the Odoo, which was the product that I was expert in, but also about other ERP systems we had to study to understand what they are, especially if we had customers trying to migrate from those systems into Odoo. So I had valuable experience assisting customers around from maybe 15 or 16 different countries so far, to not only to use Odoo to automate their business processes, but mainly to use it as a platform for digital, basically digitalizing their businesses. So it's an e-business type of projects. Other than this experience in the industry, due to my having the background of research in basically in this area, I was also able to work as a lecturer and also follow my passion in teaching. So I'm a lecturer of ERP systems right now for Federation University Australia, and at the same time a lecturer of project management for University of the Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
Wow, good.
So then this is actually giving me a good opportunity to share my knowledge and skills with students, because in this ERP projects are very risky. So we will go through some of these risks later on. But yep, other than these basically involvements in this basically university, I'm also running the high-tech maximize business. So leading my consulting firm here in Australia. So our mission is to help small and mid-sized businesses mainly to adopt digital technologies using Odoo and SAP S/4HANA the right way. So we are assisting customers to transform their services and businesses by providing ERP systems like Odoo and SAP, as well as business process management systems, which are called BPMS, and integration with other systems like Internet of Things, big data, analytics, and modern new technologies like cloud computing and AI and blockchain. So yeah, that was a little bit about myself and my involvement in the area of ERP systems. And coming back to the questions, so
yes,
the question was, can you repeat the question again?
very lengthy introduction of yours, which is good actually. The audience will know what is ERP, what is Odoo. Just now, Dr. Yusno Rizam already mentioned what is SAP. They will trigger an excitement letter, particularly for the students, how we're going to move forward on this ERP. So my question is basically, what do you think about this agile practice? Just now, Dr. Yusno Rizam mentioned it's a mixed method. It's like in research between this agile and the waterfall. And in your opinion, sir, yes, the agile practice. Yeah.
Okay, so let's look into this perspective, agile perspective, and how it can be maybe relevant to ERP systems, because that's basically the subject of the talk. And also I'll try to make it basically try to express my opinion in a simple way, so that it can be helpful for our audience as well, especially if we have attendant and they want to know more about ERP systems like Odoo or SAP.
Yes.
So ERP, well, ERP is a category of enterprise software. So enterprise softwares, and ERP is just an example of that. It's just a group of software systems that can help organizations to automate their business processes. So when we are talking about business processes, it's not just a function or a task. We are talking about multiple tasks that are relevant to each other to complete an end-to-end process. For example, for the completion of an order, we need to communicate with the customer, and then we need to have operations in the warehouse for dispatching the product, and also the account department need to clear the bill. So we have these tasks, but from people working in different departments to get the job done. And ERP systems like SAP and Odoo and many other brands are designed to automate this process. So that is great, but then when we want to implement these ERP systems, it's not that easy, because we are dealing with people from various departments.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes think of this like I give this example to my students in the class, saying that okay, let's think about it like you are inviting your girlfriends to your house for the first time, and she wants to cook for the whole family. So we have grandmother, grandfather, and kids, and everyone, and they have all different expectations of the food. But the condition is that okay, we have one food which we want to basically cook. It's just not various dish and various options for different people. So everyone has their own expectations, and therefore, even if you bring the best chef in the world to cook something, it's you still can see that sometimes people are complaining, saying that hey, this food it was too salty, but someone else can say no, it was completely okay. It's just because in ERP we have this big challenge when we want to implement ERP systems, and now let's look at it from a project management perspective. It's very challenging because you are trying to implement a new software that every single person in that organization need to log into this and do their tasks. So we have people from account department, we have people from warehouse departments, and from CRM and sales, and they have, they have been using other software that maybe they were okay with those software, isolated software for sales, isolated software for purchase, isolated software that works with the scanners in the warehouse. And now you try to bring them all to work together using a single software. So it's very hard. It's very challenging. From my experience, projects that you are basically working with people are always more challenging. When, for example, in these ERP projects, when you are dealing with people and you have to manage their expectations, you have to understand the requirements from people from various departments, and you have to communicate with a wider audience and at the same time with stakeholders of the project, it is becoming a challenge. And there's no surprise that the implementations, I think if you do research around, if our students do research around this, we have a very high risk of failure of ERP systems. Sometimes close to 40 to even 60% of ERP
60%, yeah? Wow.
fail. And that is a surprise. It's unbelievable. And even we have like great examples. I was compiling an example in Australia for a project that was like funded by the government, $1 billion project. And it was failed. Just Google, Queensland health system, and you see how much they spend on the automation of the payroll system. And after 2-3 years, they stopped the project. It was just a disaster. But the problem is that this type of projects to automate all sorts of complex processes, and ERP is a prime example of that, is risky. So when we look into the areas and why the risk is high, we can come back to something that is very important. Sometimes part of this risk is associated with the methodology itself. Historically, waterfall was the main methodology which was adopted for implementation of the ERP system. So, and it's because waterfall was generally and in generic was applied to other industries too. So basically everyone knows about waterfall. First 3 months do this, next do that, and then after that completion and done. But then when it comes to Agile, I think we need to perhaps do more of these talks like what you organize and inviting people from the industry and also from academic to work together to educate the community and also the business sectors about what exactly is behind Agile. But putting it simply, it's all about having a modern way of managing projects, and it is designed to have smaller iterations. So rather than trying to focus on a delivery of the project which will be done at the end of the project, we just try to respond to the changes more quickly by defining smaller iterations and focusing on getting smaller tasks done and see if business can get value out of this. So if we want to translate it back into area of ERP systems, what it means is that we look into like a kind of modular approach. So when we want to, for example, implement ERP systems, we just say that, hey, don't expect us to work for 12 months and then we just, turn on the new system. We just, work on a small iteration, like a month to deliver partially part of the system, and then another month to deliver something else. And this whole Agile practice can be very relevant to ERP systems, and ERP project can get benefit of this a lot.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for the elaborations of what is the purpose of Agile, the iterations and waterfall. For the audience, please Google what is waterfall, what is Agile, and then what is ERP. Okay, back to Dr. Yusnorizam. My questions, your academic background is not really in technical. We have here maybe some students outside there, or people are in the business, people are in the social sciences, and yourself, I believe your first degree is in as a BBA, and then masters in economics, and then you are moving to have this PhD in ERP kind of thing. So what is your maybe challenges maybe technical, or you need to know about the coding or programming about this ERP, or only a business processes or SOE or the project management, as Dr. Said mentioned about. Okay, over to you, sir. Yes.
All right. Thank you for the question. Right. I'm a little excited about the greatness experience of Dr. Said Motaha just now. Yeah.
Good.
So I agreed with Dr. Said that on the he said about the critical failure factor. All right. So if we don't we don't realize that actually not all ERP implementation is successfully implemented. Like he mentioned just now, right? Is
60%, eh?
60% is
Oh.
actually fail. So
Oh.
not all successful. So can you just imagine how you know company or organization invest a lot of money to ensure that the initiative will be successfully or fail to be implemented, right? Okay, for the uh, main challenge of using Agile in ERP implementation is for me when operating it together with the user or with business. Okay, yeah, like the Said mentioned just now, it's very risky project. It's very challenging. It's not easy to do the transition between the legacy system to a new ERP system. Okay, because for many years the users, the business already handle the existing system because they are already comfortable with the current system. Then you know, to change from the current to a new system is very challenging. It's not easy to change their mindset actually. Okay, so talking about challenges, ERP system consultants, right, may not include training. I mean, training specifically on what is Agile Scrum, what is waterfall, or in fact, today we have Azure DevOps, right, the new implementation methodology. So the training, we as a consultant, we're not going to provide a special training, for example, to understand Agile itself as one of the what we call it scope in the implementation of the ERP project. It is not our task because normally okay, we will think about on how to implement the ERP system end to end, right, from the first to I mean the full cycle of the implementation. So therefore, as an ERP consultant, we should explain to the participant involved, I mean to the team who involved about the approach we're going to use, right? So usually for the first and second day of the day one of the project, each of them will be a little awkward, okay, of the what is Agile, because they have no idea what is Agile all about, right? But however, after that, everyone will understand. Okay, we just need their commitment, willingness, enthusiasm to learn the new things. All right. So, so during the Agile implementation, we know that it is about speed. Okay, it is about agility. Every second, every time, the project status needs to be updated. So that is why whiteboard. I'm use this. I don't know
like
whether
a
this is
Kanban board.
correct. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. I remember it's a whiteboard. Okay, we use whiteboard or
Okay.
blackboard, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
That yeah, this whiteboard always displayed to show the project participant, to show to the project participant or project team member on the status of the project for the day. So every day we have to update the whiteboard, right? So other challenges I would say when we use Agile is in terms of the backlog management, right? So so backlog management is more difficult than when we compare it to a small development project, because the backlog consists of many activities that is not directly related to the development of software, right? ERP software. So for example, managing the difficulty to manage the data, team support, the training support, deployment activities, and etc. And other challenges is on synchronizing, right? Synchronizing and aligning the Scrum teams. Okay, when there is misalignment in communication and performance across all teams, so you will end up with an idle resource team. Okay, so all team must cross the finish line, okay, at the same time with the same level of completeness. All right. So other than that, we also face the actually we required a bureaucracy for especially large scale project. This is to keep the project on track. It is typical that the higher up are involved in formal stage gate review, and that they have what they need to support the review, right? Typically in large scale of the ERP project implementation, more output and documentation are required, right, to get full support from review board members. So if we don't have that approval, how can we move from one phase to another phase? So that is very important for me. And other challenges, right, in terms of the vendor accountability and the project performance. Okay, so everyone in the project on both client, I'm talking about both side, so client and vendor side. Vendor means the service provider who implement the ERP system. So both parties must have the same definition of done for each sprint of the project. So both parties must acknowledge each stage of the implementation has been completed. In fact, it needs to be confirmed and verified, sign off and everything, right? So there are also many conflicts happens where misunderstanding between the client side and the consultant side of from between consultant between vendor and client, right?
I see.
So therefore the understanding with the implementation methodology, for example Agile or waterfall, for me is very important. So it is one of the critical success factors of the ERP project implementations, not only during the ERP implementation, but also before the implementation and after the implementation. I mean, post go live of the ERP implementation.
I see. Okay, great. Okay, we received a question from the floor. Maybe I will escalate the questions to Dr. Syed Muhammad. Okay, what is the relationship? You already replied the answer. The relationship between microservices in the ERP software development. Maybe any relationship of these microservices, of these monoliths. Okay, over to you, sir. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank to my friend Yun Sam for sorry for elaboration of the topic, including the critical success factors and failure factors, which are very important. Coming back to the question, if okay, I try to explain it in a simple way. I always try to explain in a simple way to make it easy to understand. So yeah, switching on the lecture mode. So ERP system is a software that is already developed in most cases, and it's these days it's very hard to justify, for a team to start developing a new ERP software. So often when we talk about ERP systems in the area of computer science, most of the research are around implementation of those and customization of those systems. So that's the first thing which we need to basically look at it. In most cases, when we talk about ERP, it's just about customization, which is on the surface level of the system, not necessarily changing the core or developing the whole ERP system. Because, for example, in the case of SAP, I think if you want to develop, just to give a students a kind of indication of how complex it is to develop it, how to develop a software. For example, let's say it's an address book you want to develop. How many tables you define in the database? So addresses and then users for example, user and login and addresses and maybe a few other tables. When it comes to SAP, this system was developed with more than 60,000 tables. So imagine how you want to manage all the relations between all these tables to make the whole process work. It's even impossible to print it on a piece of paper, the relationship between these tables in the database. So it's just so complicated. And therefore, when we talk about ERP systems, we often talk about customization of that. So now coming back to microservice. So now thinking about developing a software, it can be anything. It can be Instagram, it can be Facebook, it can be SAP or an ERP system. If you want to build software, there are different software development methodologies. Traditionally, we have this monolithic type of software engineering, which is still something that we are teaching at universities, that, hey, if you want to build a software, we have database and data access layer, we have business logic, and for example, the server side programming language like PHP, Python, whatever the case is, ASP.NET. And then we have the interface, which can be HTML, it can be React, and whatever the framework is. And then when we want to build a software, we think about having a server, for example, for a database, maybe a server for a business logic or the web server and the database server, and also the front end side of the application. This was the common method of developing software, which is basically what now these days we call it monolithic architecture. An architecture that allows us to design software. And again, the software can be anything. It can be Instagram, Facebook, or even ERP software. But then there was a problem. The problem was about a need in the market. Now we are in a market that we may build an app, and then within a few months, we can see that our users are raising from a few hundred to hundreds of thousands of users. So then a challenge for designing a software is scalability. How do you design a software that can scale up to address the needs for a wider audience? I'm just so this is just mainly based on my experience, because I forgot to tell you that I'm also expert in residence, like a virtual CTO at Sydney Startup Hub. So my job, like half a day in a week, I always go there. My job is to assist Australian startup founders to build the ultimate tech stack that they can scale it up. So I'm assisting those technical and non-technical founders on how to design their application. And often they have ideas that, okay, I want to build this application to address 1 million users and to become the next Facebook or something like this. So my job is not to judge whether the idea can really address these kind of levels. My job is to show them how they can develop this using new architectures. And microservice architecture here is an alternative to a traditional monolithic architecture, because the problem we had in the traditional architecture is that if you have a database server and if you have a web server, how do you scale it up? Let's say the traffic is increased. So how do you scale it up? So there are limitations in terms of vertical and horizontal way of scaling this up. And think about it like you have to increase the memory. So if the RAM is 8 GB on your server and you have more traffic, upgrade it into 16 GB, upgrade it into 40 GB. But there is always a limit. So you can't really think about it like if you wanted to build Facebook on top of this, existing hardware on the internet, we had to buy a server, which is not there obviously, that has thousands of gigabytes of RAM and petabytes of hard drive. So that kind of server doesn't exist. So then we started thinking about another flexible way, architecture that can help us to design software system that is designed from the day one for scale. So it is designed for the from the day one that we look at the software, not from this perspective of having these 3 layers, database layers, you know, presentations and business logic, but trying to divide the problem into smaller problems and develop services, microservices with their own database, with their own programming language, with their own interface to communicate with each other through APIs. And then those APIs are published to a web app and a mobile app for our clients. It means that from technical perspective, it means that if we want to build a Facebook, we want to have a team that is focusing on Facebook notification. That team is just handling Facebook notification. And they are working on a function that is returning a notification for a user. So every time you are logging to Facebook, Facebook interface is calling that function and retrieving your notification. That's it. How they do it is up to them. Which programming language they use it is just up to them. In fact, as from the perspective of the architecture, we don't care whether they are using PHP or ASP or what. What we care about is that this type of service, which is only addressing the need for the notification of the Facebook, is isolated and it's working independently from the other elements. Because this way, that team can scale up, that team can update some changes in the platform without recompiling the whole Facebook. So that is a way that we just define the main basically application into smaller microservices, and then microservice is an architecture. So just coming back now to the question, the comparing ERP with. So ERP is a software system. If you want to build it, up to you whether you want to use traditional architecture, if I understand the question. And the question is more about building a new ERP system, which is financially not viable, I would say.
Yeah.
But even if you want to build it, you can go for a traditional architecture, or you can go for you can go for microservice architecture. If you want to build it for a modern new basically businesses out there, maybe better to start with microservices, microservice architecture. If you want to build that basically ERP system, that's a modern new way. And when we talk about microservice, it's just you can build anything, not just ERP, but you can build like Facebook, Instagram, and something like that.
Okay, thanks a lot for your elaboration, sir. Thanks, sir. Question from Naim Malik. Okay, we have 4 questions actually, but time is running out. But it's okay. Another questions maybe to Dr. Yus. Maybe you already answered about that. From Joshua Faburada is wondering about why does some ERP implementation does not successfully implemented? What are the biggest factor, Dr. Yus? About that, and maybe can you share about the successful rate of implementing, let's say, using DevOps? Okay, over to you, Dr. Yus, about the maybe related just now you mentioned. Okay, please.
Yeah, actually, I don't have much experience on the DevOps methodology. It's a new thing for me actually. So if you want to talk about Agile, DevOps, right? It's a
okay. Never mind.
Actually,
I reserve the questions to Syed for your questions. From Shahmi Rizwan. Do large organizations such as Google, Microsoft, just now Syed mentioned about the Facebook, they have their own in-house ERP system instead of buying off the shelf, as you're mentioning? Is the success rate for implementing any in-house ERP system better than the third party, or when it is more beneficial to make an in-house? So how's you rate that? Yes, please.
Successful rate.
Let's say like this Google or Microsoft, they have their own Microsoft Dynamics 365. What's your opinion?
I think maybe 8 out of 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
80%. Yeah. Okay.
Because Microsoft now most of the project implementation, we are using their product actually. So yeah, especially during this pandemic, people work from home. We use the what we call a collaboration tool, right? Like Microsoft Microsoft tool, to make sure we can communicate well to the business among our project team, right? So like I said, the successful rate, I don't know, but I can give it out of 10 now.
Yeah, 8 out of 10, yeah, almost 80% lah, I would say. Yeah? Okay, that's great, wonderful. Based on your experience, the usage of collaborative tools.
True.
I think nowadays they have this like M360, if not mistaken. Yeah? There's some new tools available, SharePoint, kind of that. Okay, maybe just to recap back the questions to Syed, Dr. Syed. Talking about this methodology, relationship with DevOps, the development and operations. What's the successful rate? Maybe you hear, or maybe some of your colleague or your customer already using that. Number one. Question two, what is the biggest factor that we need to see when we like to implement those implementation project management? Maybe to use the enterprise architecture, kind of that. Yeah, please.
Yep. Sorry, Dr. Nurhizam, but I think I missed the first question. There was a little bit noise.
The first question is about the DevOps methodology.
DevOps.
Yeah, any successful rate which is relevant to the ERP implementations. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So DevOps, DevOps stands. The relation between DevOps and to ERP. That's the question, if I understand, right?
Yes.
And all right. So DevOps stands for develop. Basically, it's about development operations. So software engineers, they can. Again, traditionally, we just used to develop software systems and collaborate with each other. But then there was some changes, and then DevOps was basically the result of those changes that are very positive. What happened is that we thought that, hey, it is very hard to manage the process of updating the software. Maybe traditionally we had a software that we could ship using the CD drives and DVDs. So if there was a new update like Windows XP, a new like Service Pack 2 or 3, we could just basically ship the new version of that CD and distribute it to the retail market even. But these days it's changed. So people expect to receive the software if it's an app on their mobile phone, maybe on their Windows or Mac OS or any other platform, and they expect that app to be able to communicate with whatever the server is, and then to receive more updates, to get new features and bug fixes automatically. So this required software engineers to rethink about how they are developing software systems, and DevOps was born out of this to basically to introduce a new role. And this role, if someone says I'm a DevOps engineer, in fact, he or she is again a software engineer. But what he or she is doing in a company is that he doesn't get involved in the process of developing the software. So basically what we are saying that we don't care what we are building here. We are building ERP systems. We don't care what it is. What we care about is that we want to use our software engineering and software development skills to build a pipeline, so that when software engineers are working together and then they update a new change in the software, we want to develop an application or a framework or a process that is helping us to automatically test it, automatically integrate it with the base code, and automatically distribute it to all the customers. A software engineer who is taking care of all these stages of this process is a DevOps engineer. So when it comes to ERP systems, this is also a need. So when we are basically shipping ERP software, customers expect to receive bug fixes. They expect to receive new, basically, add-ons or new features in the software. So therefore, a DevOps engineer or DevOps, I would say, DevOps practice is a practice of building a pipeline of some sort of servers and automations around this to help us to distribute new bug fixes for the ERP system. And again, coming back to the nature of the question, which is related to ERP systems, often we are not investing on building a new software because ERP, as I said before, is far too complex to develop from scratch.
Oh.
So when it comes to DevOps, my assumption is that this relation makes sense if, for example, someone is working as an ERP, like SAP technical consultant. So a SAP technical consultant is someone who is developing add-ons. For example, my friend here just now talked about SAP S4HANA. So you can develop apps for SAP S4HANA, which is a new interface that is basically helping users to communicate with SAP in a more user-friendly way compared to the traditional methods. So now you want to develop a new app that shows like dashboards to users. You develop this, you ship it to the client, but then client is saying that, hey, there are bugs in this app. So you are working in your lab to see the bugs, but then you fix it. How do you want to ship it to your client? What if your client is not just a single client? You have sold this to maybe 200 or 300 users of SAP for different SAP implementation done in different places. So do you want to have an automation around this process? So you can have peace of mind that, okay, if we test it internally, if it works, with the press of a button, it actually distributes this bug fix to all my customers. And again, here we are not we are only focusing or in our own customization. So we are developing a module, and that module is nothing but a piece of code that is changing part of the SAP system. So for that, we still are responsible to maintain that particular module, not the whole system, but at least that particular module. So if there is any bug in that module, we have to be able to develop like add-ons, more add-ons, or fix bugs around related to that. And the process that can help us to automate these distribution of these bug fixes, integration of that, and also testing of that for our internal software engineering team is DevOps.
Okay, thank you. Maybe in addition to that, there is one question. So since Agile may be used in most of the approaches for the add-on, for the maintaining the bugs, kind of that, that's a Scrum method is being used in this ERP. Yeah.
Very interesting question. So basically, interesting point, and thanks for asking. At least in the context of Australia, I would say, when we talk about Agile, from my experience, I would say that 8 out of 10 companies that are adopting Agile as a project management methodology, they use a Scrum for this. And then it's just to make it clear for the audience, when we talk about Agile, it could be mainly about a paradigm, a new paradigm. Like I don't want to use the word theory, but it's more like a new paradigm and a new approach. But then when companies want to adopt it, they just look at it and they just ask a question of, okay, that is fine, I want Agile, but give me exactly the instructions, what to follow, exactly what should I do first day, what should I do next day. So when it comes to implementing Agile, there are other methodologies that are in fact Agile, but they are more toward, I would say, practical aspects. So we have XP methodology, we have, for example, a Scrum methodology, and these are all Agile.
Yes.
I think the most popular one is Scrum. Like XP is a little bit, for example, to me was like not a good experience to try implementing XP. XP is a kind of Agile that requires 2 engineers to work with the same laptop. So it's a little bit strange if
programming,
sometimes, when you hire someone like an engineer and say that, hey, you two need to work together all the time, you just think like, what is it? So someone working with a keyboard, another one with a mouse, or what exactly? So it's hard to basically, I think, at least in my case, I tried to adopt it and that was challenging. So engineers were confused, they didn't like it. But I think Scrum is the most popular one. So when Scrum is basically a popular one, then the question is, okay, let's apply Scrum to work on ERP implementation. In my case, it was a little bit challenging. And maybe I can share just a few points about the challenges. First of all, it was very beneficial. So it is definitely my #1 preference. And maybe the only most important reason why I couldn't fully adopt it to implement ERP system was because of the fact that we had to follow customers' expectations. So customers, they were not educated about Agile. And I'm just trying to be completely honest with you. So it's hard for, a business owner who is like an entrepreneur, a business owner owning a factory of, a few hundred people working, to say that, hey, we have a different project methodology, Agile, and we can focus on delivering, values every month which is called sprints. So what they look into is that, hey, I'm okay with this waterfall methodology. I've been using this for 30 years. So just tell me how long it takes to migrate data, how long it takes to complete your system analysis, how long it takes you to implement that, and also how long it takes for the training. So then the nature of the question that they are asking you is, can you please tell me how you can implement ERP using traditional approach, waterfall approach? So the nature of the methodology is already in their needs and their demand. So it's hard to come back to them saying that, hey, we can deliver, but can we look at it from a different perspective? We can deliver it in different milestones. So instead of expecting us to have the next milestone in 3 months or 4 months time, let's divide it into sprints. So changing that perspective into like a new paradigm of a Scrum methodology was very hard for us. So at the end, I realized that at least in the context of ERP system, it is very beneficial to use Agile and Scrum methodologies for the actual companies. For example, if SAP wants to continuously build new features, Agile is the best practice. But whether it is the best practice for those companies that are implementing SAP for their customers, that is a question. Definitely it is beneficial. I tried that and it's very beneficial. But the challenge here is that when we want to implement it, sometimes customers are forcing us toward following these waterfall methodologies. So at least in my case, I can say that in this case, 8 out of 10 customers prefer the implementation to be on a fixed price, very clear waterfall type of methodology, and they didn't like this basically Agile methodology. For those two, was very successful. The project that they were happy and they were basically accepting this Agile. It was very successful, perfect experience. I really enjoyed working with that client. But I think, Dr. Nurizam, we need more talks like these to be organized for.
Okay, sure. Okay, there is one last question, but just to recap your answer just now, for the business owner, for the companies, they don't care. You are on waterfall, you are on Agile. At the end, bottom line is dollar and cent. What's the profit? How to minimize the time? 3 months, 6 months, whatever. They want that's why they go for the 80% rather than 20%. Okay, maybe last questions before I recap. We have only 2 minutes, maybe injury time 5 minutes. For Dr. Yus, probably there is one question about they say the Scrum method will be very good. Okay, maybe Naim mentioned about Naim Malik said, is it true that in using Agile require 48 hours works he learned from the software engineering? Any ideas? 48 hours. Normally it's I think 2 weeks, right? Sprint.
Yeah, okay. I just want to share from my past experience, right? It doesn't matter if you implement the project remotely or you meet people in person, physically in the office, right? So okay, just focus on what happened during the current pandemic, right? We are using the Microsoft Team, for example, okay, as a collaboration tool. So in the virtual session, like I said earlier, we use a whiteboard or virtual whiteboard, yeah. If you're using Microsoft Team, and it is displayed for 24 hours. Okay. so it is very useful for global project perspective. For example, more project team members are getting involved from various countries around the globe. This is for global implementation with cross-company rollout, right? So we will switch the switch. It does not mean that we are working 48 hours non-stop, right? We work for 8 hours a day. After that, we have something to update in the whiteboard for the next person to take over to continue what are the pending tasks in the previous working day, right? And also we will ask participant to or project team to update the whiteboard so that the next people, next consultant can continue the task. So just to let you know that actually not in every single phase of the implementation of the ERP implementation, we need to adopt with the agile approach. Okay, there are 5 stages, right? 5 or 6 stages of the agile life cycle. Just correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Said. I remember the phase is like project kick-off, the initiation of the project, project planning, okay, the development phase, production, and the last phase, I think retirement or close up, project close up or go live period phase. And maybe the agile implementation will be applied during the project analysis phase or planning phase. So we are using 100% agile methodology. But after that, I don't think the whole cycle of the implementation, we're going to use the agile approach. We can switch it to other method like waterfall, okay, for example, or the DevOps. Yeah, it is running 24 or 48 hours, but I mean the people will take over from a different shift of working time. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you very much for both ERP expert, I would say. You can see audience, doesn't mean that when you're doing your master's, your PhD, you're going to end up as a researchers, as a professors. You can see that like Dr. Said Mutaha is as well a hybrid of industry ERP consultant over there in Australia, plus come a lecturer or trainer. And Yusno Rizam as well, I think also is a practitioner, meaning to say that your ambition to have a PhD or a tertiary level doesn't mean you will end up like someone in the university, for example, as a researcher. And thanks a lot for your questions, audience outside there. And here we do have the LinkedIn link for Syed Muhammad Mutaha. Probably any Malaysians or my students from Vietnam who like to work in Australia, you can get ideas how to go to work in Australia, or if you would like to know about our friends, Dr. Yusno Rizam, how to work in SAP. Bear in mind that the first degree of Dr. Yusno Rizam is BBA. We have here students from BBA, I think from one of the private universities. See, although you are in MRS, see the challenges that both are, I myself consider, a successful one in their career as an ERP consultant. Well, I think that's all for tonight. Again, thank you very, very much for Dr. Syed Muhammad Mutaha back in Australia. Now almost over there is 11:30, almost midnight. So sorry about that. And Dr. Yus in Malaysia, I think both of you already work maybe on the different time zone. You're quite familiar with that when you're implementing.
Yeah, actually we wrote some of article or journal previously, right, with Dr. Syed Mutaha. I can remember, I think few years ago. Yeah, we wrote about the ERP system and project management.
Yes, okay.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to work with the team, with yourself, and also with Dr. Nur Hizam. And thank you very again for inviting us.
Okay, thanks a lot for the 1 hour fruitful discussion. Till then, till we'll meet again. Stay safe, stay healthy for the speakers as well as for the audience outside there. Okay, till then, bye bye.